Many people know things, but very few understand them deeply. Richard Feynman explained this many times in his work and teaching. He showed that deep understanding is not about gathering more information. It is about seeing the idea clearly. Deep understanding begins when the mind stops holding ideas in a loose and vague way. When you slow down, clean the idea, and break it into clear parts, the mind begins to see what the idea truly is. This removes confusion and creates a stable base for deeper thought. Cognitive load theory supports this. The mind works better when information is simple and well structured. Deep understanding does not come from complexity. Deep understanding begins with clear and simple thinking. Deep understanding begins with honesty about what you truly know. People often fool themselves first. They believe they understand something because they have heard the words or repeated the idea once. But when the mind is checked closely, the understanding is thin. When you observe your own thinking, comprehension improves. You begin this step by listing the parts of the idea you do not fully grasp. You do not judge yourself. You simply mark the unclear points. This removes the pressure to pretend and gives your mind a clean place to start. As you do this, the idea becomes sharper. You begin to see where the real work must happen. Deep understanding grows because you have cleared away false certainty and created space for real clarity. Deep thinking starts when you admit what is unclear. Plain language is one of Feynman's strongest tools for deep understanding. If you cannot explain an idea in simple words, you do not yet understand it. You may know the terms, but you do not know the meaning. The brain understands and remembers information better when it is simple and clear. When you use everyday words, the mind is forced to organize the idea. You cannot hide confusion behind complex phrases. The gaps appear, and you must fill them. To practice this, take the idea and explain it in a short paragraph using only common words. Imagine you are talking to someone younger, but without using stories or emotional scenes, just the idea in its clean form. As you do this, you begin to feel where the idea is strong and where it is weak. Plain language gives structure to thought. It stabilizes the idea in your mind and prepares it for deeper work. Simple language is the doorway to deep understanding. Feynman broke ideas into small parts because the mind cannot handle too much at once. Large ideas feel confusing because they are unstructured. When you divide them into smaller pieces, each part becomes clearer and easier to understand. The mind works efficiently when information is organized into manageable units. You begin by listing the main parts of the idea. Then you take each part and explain it on its own in simple language. You do not rush to combine the parts. You work calmly through each one. When all parts are clear, you rebuild the idea by connecting them again. Now the whole idea feels solid instead of overwhelming. You move from surface knowledge to deeper understanding because each piece has been examined closely. Small parts make deep understanding possible. Understanding becomes deeper when new ideas connect to old ideas. Feynman used this step constantly. He knew that ideas do not stay in the mind as separate pieces. They stay when they link to something familiar. The brain stores knowledge in networks. When a new idea attaches to an existing network, it becomes meaningful. It has a place to live in your mind. To do this, take the idea and ask, what does this remind me of? Then write a simple comparison. The match does not need to be perfect. It only needs to make the idea easier to grasp. You can compare its structure, its purpose, or its steps to something you already understand well. When you form these links, the idea becomes easier to remember, easier to use, and easier to explain. Deep understanding grows because the idea is no longer isolated. Connections strengthen the mind's ability to understand deeply. Feynman often used simple examples to check whether he understood an idea deeply. Examples slow the mind and force it to move step by step. They reveal whether the idea holds under pressure. When you use an idea, not just think about it, you strengthen the pathways that hold it. You also expose the weak parts of your understanding. To apply this, create a basic example that fits the idea. Then walk through the example in clear steps. Do not rush. Explain what happens first, then next, then next. If at any point the idea becomes unclear, you have spotted a gap. Simple examples show whether the idea is strong or fragile. They reveal whether you understand the idea in a deep, practical way. Examples reveal how deep your understanding truly is. Feynman believed that confusion is not a problem, it is a signal. When your explanation breaks, when an example fails, or when a simple question makes the idea collapse, you have found the next part to work on. You detect a weakness, return to that part, and rebuild your understanding. You simplify again. You test again. You repeat until the weakness becomes strength. This slow, careful repair process builds deep comprehension. Every time you correct a gap, the idea becomes more stable. You begin to trust the idea more because you have tested it, fixed it, and strengthened it. Over time, the idea no longer depends on fast thinking or memorized phrases. It becomes something you truly understand. Feynman approached knowledge this way across his entire career. Repairing weak points builds deep, reliable understanding. Many people think deep understanding grows from complexity. Feynman showed that the opposite is true. Depth comes from clarity, not from adding more detail. The brain can only hold so much at once. Extra details that do not support the core idea only increase noise. They make the idea harder to think about and harder to use. To remove noise, look at your explanation and identify details that do not change the meaning. These might be labels, side facts, or secondary points. Remove them from your working version. Keep only what helps you grasp the idea clearly. When the idea becomes smaller and cleaner, your understanding becomes deeper. You can think about the idea calmly, without strain. Removing noise strengthens deep understanding. A mental model gives structure to your understanding. Feynman relied on simple internal models to make ideas easier to handle. A mental model is not a picture. It is a simple structure that shows how the idea works. People think better when ideas are organized into clear structures. When you create a simple model for the idea, your mind moves through it calmly and logically. To build a model, outline the idea's main parts and show how they connect. You might write a short sequence like, first this happens, then this, then this. Keep the model small so the mind can move slowly and clearly through it. A clean model supports deeper reasoning because the idea no longer floats in your mind. It has a shape you can use. A simple mental model supports deep and stable understanding. Feynman believed that true understanding appears when you can use an idea in many situations. If the idea works only in the form you first learned it, the understanding is shallow. If you can use it in different contexts, you understand it deeply. When you apply an idea across contexts, your mind recognizes deeper patterns within it. This strengthens the core of the idea and reveals its true nature. To practice this, take the idea and apply it to 3 different situations. They can be simple situations. The goal is to see how the idea behaves in different forms. As you do this, you notice parts that stay the same and parts that change. Each new use strengthens your understanding. You begin to see the idea more clearly because you see more of its structure. Wide application deepens understanding. Deep understanding is not a one-time event. It is a habit. Feynman reached depth because he practiced clear thinking daily. He explained ideas simply. He tested them. He fixed confusion. He repeated this constantly. The brain changes based on repeated activity. When you practice deep thinking often, the pathways for clarity become stronger. You begin to think in this way naturally. You can practice this by taking one idea each day and applying this method. Explain it plainly. Break it into parts. Create an example. Fix the gaps. Remove noise. Connect it to something you know. Over time, your mind becomes sharper. Ideas become easier to understand. You develop the habit of deep thinking without forcing it. Daily practice builds a mind that understands deeply. The final insight is simple. Deep understanding grows from clarity, not from collecting more information. Richard Feynman showed this through his teaching, his research, and his way of thinking. Deep understanding happens when you simplify the idea, break it apart, fix the gaps, and build a clean structure. It happens when you use the idea in examples and new situations. It happens when you remove noise and focus on what matters. Ideas with clear meaning are easier to think about, easier to remember, and easier to use. When your mind works with clean meaning, depth becomes possible. Anyone can build this kind of mind. It is not a gift. It is a practice. And with time, the practice becomes your natural way of thinking. Deep understanding grows from clear, simple thinking practiced over time.